The office building stood tall in the heart of the city, its glass windows reflecting the constant hum of activity inside. Employees scurried about, glued to their computers, attending meetings and managing tasks. It was a place where deadlines ruled and productivity was paramount. The staff, busy with their own work, rarely noticed the quieter presence in the background, the janitor, Alex. Alex, a middle-aged man with graying hair and calloused hands, had worked at the company for years. He was a quiet, diligent worker who took pride in his job, even if the job itself was often overlooked. Each day he arrived early, sweeping floors, wiping down counters, and taking care of the office spaces. No one really saw him, but he was always there, doing his job without complaint. His uniform was often stained with cleaning supplies, and he wore a constant air of humility. He didn't mind. It was enough to know he was contributing in his own way, but there was one person who saw him too much: Mr. Crawford, the boss. A man in his early 40s, Mr. Crawford exuded arrogance and power. He had a reputation for belittling those beneath him, especially the janitors and other low-ranking staff members. To him, they were nothing more than obstacles in the path of his own success. He enjoyed using his position to assert dominance over them, often humiliating them in front of others, to make himself feel superior. It was just another day in the office for him. It was the middle of the afternoon when the entire office gathered for a company-wide meeting. The conference room was filled with employees discussing the latest projects, deadlines, and goals. The chatter echoed off the walls as everyone settled into their seats. Alex, as usual, was in the background, mopping the floors of the hallway, his back bent under the weight of his task. He had cleaned the meeting room before, making sure the floors were spotless for the afternoon session, but as the meeting dragged on, one of the employees dropped a cup, spilling coffee across the floor. Alex, noticing the mess, walked toward the room with his mop bucket, preparing to clean it up. He didn't think much of it, just another part of his routine. But as Alex entered the meeting room, his presence was immediately noticed. Mr. Crawford, standing at the front with a smug expression, turned his gaze toward him. The conversation paused, and the staff's attention shifted to the janitor. Alex, head down, tried to keep his focus on his task. "Ah, here we go," Mr. Crawford said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Our hero, the janitor. I guess we'll just wait while you do your important work, huh, Alex?" The comment echoed through the room, and Alex felt the heat rise in his face. He didn't look up. The staff shifted uncomfortably in their chairs, unsure of how to react. Alex continued to mop the floor, trying to ignore the sting of Crawford's words, but Crawford wasn't finished. "Can you make sure to do a good job this time?" he continued, loud enough for everyone to hear. "We wouldn't want the place to look like a disaster. I mean, it's just cleaning, right? I'm sure it's not hard work, especially for someone like you." He gave a small mocking laugh, which was met with a few uncomfortable chuckles from the staff. Alex's grip tightened around the mop handle. He wanted to respond, to defend himself, but he knew better. He had learned long ago that speaking up only made things worse. Instead, he kept his head low, trying to finish the task as quickly as possible, but it wasn't easy with the eyes of the entire office on him. Mr. Crawford walked closer, standing just a few feet away from Alex as he continued to clean. "I suppose you enjoy this," Crawford said, his tone cold. "Living in your little corner of the office, invisible to everyone. Not exactly the life I'd want, but then again, you probably wouldn't know any better, would you?" The words stung. Alex could feel his heart race, but he remained silent. Every word from Mr. Crawford cut deeper, but he refused to show any weakness. The room was silent now, everyone awkwardly watching as the tension between the boss and the janitor grew. "Isn't it funny," Crawford continued, not noticing the discomfort of the staff, "how someone like Alex, someone who can barely hold a broom, is the one who has to clean up our messes?" He let out a dry laugh. "A real shame, isn't it?" More laughter followed, but it was strained. Alex's face flushed, his hands shaking as he tried to finish his job, wishing he could disappear into the floor beneath him. The staff avoided making eye contact with him, all of them too afraid to speak up or intervene. They knew the power Mr. Crawford held over their careers. As Alex worked, the humiliating remarks continued. Mr. Crawford paced around the room, making sure to keep his audience entertained. "I don't know how you do it, Alex," he said, his voice dripping with mock admiration. "Cleaning up after all of us. You must be a real expert at cleaning up people's messes, considering your position." The laughter grew louder, the awkwardness palpable. Alex's hands gripped the mop so tightly, his knuckles turning white. He just wanted to finish, to get out of that room, but Mr. Crawford didn't seem to have had enough. "Good job, Alex," Mr. Crawford said with a fake smile. "Just don't get in the way while the rest of us do the important work, okay?" Finally, Alex finished mopping the floor, his face burning with humiliation. He wanted to flee, but he walked quietly out of the room, not a word passing his lips. The laughter continued to echo behind him as he made his way back to his small, cramped utility closet. Inside the quiet space, Alex let out a slow, shaky breath. He wasn't angry, he was beyond that. He was simply tired, tired of being invisible, tired of being humiliated, and tired of being treated as though his role didn't matter. But even though the laughter still echoed in his mind, he knew he had no choice but to keep going. After all, what else could he do? Alex walked slowly back to his small utility closet, the echo of Mr. Crawford's cruel words still ringing in his ears. Each step felt heavier than the last, and his chest tightened with every breath. He had been through countless humiliations at the hands of Mr. Crawford before, but today had been different. Today, in front of the entire staff, he had been reduced to nothing. It stung more than he could explain. Once in the dimly lit room, he leaned against the wall, dropping his mop to the floor. He closed his eyes, trying to push the feelings of humiliation away, but they clung to him like an unwanted weight. He had worked at the company for years, years of early mornings, long hours, and dedication, and yet in the eyes of everyone, he was invisible. His role didn't matter. He didn't matter. He stared at the small window in his closet, the faint light filtering through. Should he just quit, walk away from all of it, maybe find something else where he could feel like a person again? But as soon as the thought entered his mind, it was followed by a rush of guilt. He had responsibilities, a family to care for, a sick wife who depended on him, his children needed him, and quitting wasn't an option. He had to keep going, no matter how much it hurt. The next morning, Alex tried to push the incident behind him. He put on his uniform, like he always did, and walked into the office, trying to hold his head high. But the memory of Mr. Crawford's laughter, and the way the staff had silently watched him lingered in his mind. How long could he keep this up? How long could he endure being treated like this, day after day, without saying a word? He sighed, feeling trapped in a role that never seemed to offer him any dignity or respect. His hands trembled slightly as he picked up his cleaning supplies. He had to keep going, but the weight of it all felt unbearable. The next morning, Mr. Crawford entered the office as usual, expecting the usual flurry of activity. The staff, gathered in the break room, seemed unusually distracted, whispering among themselves and glancing at their phones. As he walked past, he overheard bits of their conversation. "Did you hear this? Alex. Alex was someone important. I can't believe it. I thought he was just a janitor," another voice murmured. "Turns out, he was a big deal. A CEO or something." Mr. Crawford's brow furrowed as he approached the group. What was all the fuss about? He could feel the tension in the air, a ripple of surprise and curiosity that he hadn't anticipated. His staff, normally so focused on their work, had all been diverted to something else. "What's going on here?" he asked, his voice sharp. "Why all the whispering?" One of the employees, a young woman named Sarah, hesitated before speaking. Mr. Crawford, you might want to look at this." She held up her phone, showing him a news article with Alex's name on it. The headline read, "Ex-CEO turns to humble job as janitor to care for family." Mr. Crawford stared at the screen, his stomach sinking. The article detailed Alex's former life, his years as a successful high-level executive at a prominent company. He had been the CEO of a multi-million-dollar business, respected by peers, and admired for his leadership. But due to personal reasons, including the need to care for his sick wife and provide for his children, Alex had left that world behind. The shock hit Mr. Crawford like a ton of bricks. The janitor he had belittled, The man he had humiliated in front of the entire office just the day before was no ordinary man. Alex wasn't just a lowly employee. He had once been someone Mr. Crawford could have looked up to, someone who had sat in boardrooms, made important decisions, and commanded respect. He felt a rush of shame flood his chest, a hot flush spreading across his face. The man he had mocked, the man he had degraded, was someone he would have once called a peer. Mr. Crawford's mind raced as he recalled the cruel words he had spoken to Alex, the jokes, the insults. He could feel the weight of his actions bearing down on him. How could he have been so blind? How could he have been so arrogant? Sarah, seeing Mr. Crawford's reaction, continued. It was an old connection of his, one of his colleagues from back in the day, who shared the story. Alex never wanted anyone to know. He didn't want special treatment, just to do his job with dignity. Mr. Crawford remained silent for a moment, his eyes glued to the phone screen. The realization hit him hard. Alex hadn't shared his past with anyone. He hadn't sought sympathy or preferential treatment. He had chosen the humble job of a janitor, despite the fact that he could have returned to the corporate world at any time. He had done it out of love and responsibility for his family, to provide for them in the best way he could, no matter how small the job seemed. As the silence in the break room grew, the staff, who had been standing around in disbelief, began to exchange glances. They had all seen Alex as nothing more than a janitor, but now, as they absorbed the truth, they couldn't help but view him with new eyes. They had watched him clean the floors, wipe down desks, and go about his work with quiet efficiency, never asking for anything in return. He had never acted superior, never bragged about his past. He had simply done his job, and now they saw how much he had sacrificed. Mr. Crawford, still stunned, finally spoke. I had no idea. His voice was quiet, almost regretful, and the words felt foreign coming from him. It was the first time in a long time that he had truly felt humbled. Alex, standing just outside the break room, overheard the conversation. He could feel his pulse quicken, but he refused to let himself be seen. He didn't want to be part of the gossip or the sudden shift in perception. He had kept his secret for a reason. It wasn't about the past, it was about the present, and he wasn't looking for praise or recognition. He had a job to do, and that was all that mattered. But even though Alex kept his distance, he couldn't help but notice the change in the way the staff interacted with him. They no longer ignored him, no longer treated him as if he were invisible. The once dismissive glances were replaced with nods of respect. Some even smiled at him as he passed by. The shift was subtle, but it was there. As for Mr. Crawford, the realization of his own behavior began to eat at him. He had mocked a man who had once been his equal, and now that same man had become a symbol of humility and sacrifice. Mr. Crawford wasn't sure what to do with this newfound knowledge. He had been so caught up in his own sense of superiority that he hadn't even considered the man behind the mop bucket. The shame he felt was unbearable, and for the first time in years, he questioned his own actions and the kind of leader he truly wanted to be. The story of Alex, the janitor with a hidden past, had turned everything upside down, and Mr. Crawford, along with the rest of the staff, would never look at him the same way again. The weight of his actions hung heavily over Mr. Crawford as the day wore on. He couldn't shake the image of Alex, the humble janitor who had once been a high-level executive, and the cruel words he had spoken to him the day before. The shame gnawed at him. He had made a fool of himself, and now, he had to figure out how to make it right. At the end of the day, Mr. Crawford found himself standing outside the small utility closet where Alex had retreated after the meeting. His heart pounded in his chest as he raised his hand to knock. He wasn't sure what he expected, maybe an angry confrontation or a dismissal, but he had to at least try to apologize. He had been wrong, and it was time to own up to it. Alex looked up as the door opened, his expression unreadable. Mr. Crawford hesitated before speaking. Alex, I need to talk to you, he said, his voice strained. Alex didn't answer immediately. He merely nodded, stepping aside to let Mr. Crawford enter. There was a quiet tension between them, the air thick with unspoken words. I owe you an apology, Mr. Crawford began, his voice unsteady. The way I treated you yesterday was completely out of line. I was arrogant, and I can't even explain why I acted the way I did. I was wrong. He paused, his eyes searching Alex's face for some sign of forgiveness. I didn't know about your past. I should have respected you for the person you are, not just the role you were in here. I'm sorry. Alex listened, his expression stoic. Mr. Crawford's words hung in the air, but to Alex, they didn't feel like much of an apology at all. It was too little, too late. He had spent so many years being overlooked and mistreated that he had learned not to expect much from others, especially from someone like Mr. Crawford. I hear you, Alex said quietly, his voice calm but firm. But respect isn't something that can just be given and taken back whenever you feel like it. It has to be earned and proven. You can't just decide one day that I'm worthy of respect after everything you've said and done. Mr. Crawford opened his mouth to speak, but Alex held up a hand, stopping him. I'm not angry, Alex continued, but I'm not going to accept an apology just because you feel guilty now. Respect comes through actions, not words. For a moment there was silence. Mr. Crawford, caught off guard, didn't know how to respond. The apology he had prepared, the one he had thought would fix everything, seemed insufficient in the face of Alex's quiet strength. He had expected Alex to immediately forgive him, to brush the whole thing off, but Alex's words had struck him hard. I'll do better, Mr. Crawford said finally, his voice quieter. I'll make it right. I won't make the same mistake again. Alex nodded, still calm, but there was a subtle change in his posture. He no longer felt small or invisible. He had been through too much to let Mr. Crawford's apology define his worth. His strength was in his silence, in his ability to endure the insults and continue moving forward. I'll be here doing my job, Alex said, his voice steady. I don't need your apology, but I expect things to be different from now on. I won't accept being treated like I don't matter. The tension in the room was palpable as Mr. Crawford left, the weight of Alex's words lingering in the air. He knew that earning back Alex's respect, or anyone's, would take far more than a simple apology. It would take time, effort, and genuine change. But for now, Alex had made one thing clear. He didn't need validation from someone like Mr. Crawford. He knew his worth, and that was enough. A few days after the tense conversation between Alex and Mr. Crawford, things took an unexpected turn at the company. Whispers spread like wildfire through the office as news broke of a massive scandal involving Mr. Crawford. The company's financial records were being investigated, and it was revealed that Mr. Crawford had been involved in significant financial mismanagement and even corruption. It seemed that, for years, he had been using his position to cover up fraudulent activities that threatened the company's survival. The news sent shockwaves through the staff. How could the man who had been their leader for so long be the one at the center of such a scandal? Many of the employees, including the ones who had once been afraid of speaking out, now looked around nervously, realizing that they had been unknowingly complicit in Crawford's web of deceit. It didn't take long for the truth to emerge. The reason Mr. Crawford had treated Alex so cruelly, belittling him in front of the staff, and mocking his position, was because of his own deep insecurities. Crawford had feared that Alex, an intelligent and capable man with a past that could easily rival his own, might expose his corruption. Alex's quiet dignity, his ability to stay in the background and keep his past hidden, had been a threat to Crawford. Crawford had tried to suppress Alex, to make him feel small, so that no one would suspect that the humble janitor might know far more than he let on. But the truth was about to surface in a way that no one had expected. As the company scrambled to deal with the scandal, Alex's former experience as a CEO made him an unlikely yet invaluable asset. He had handled crises before, dealt with financial problems, and made decisions that required careful attention and strategic thinking. His time as a janitor had not dulled his skills. If anything, it had given him the opportunity to observe the inner workings of the company from a different perspective. When the management team, struggling to keep the company afloat amidst the scandal, realized they needed someone with Alex's expertise, they approached him. In an astonishing turn of events, Alex found himself playing a key role in uncovering the full extent of Mr. Crawford's mismanagement. His insight and understanding of business operations helped unravel the web of lies and corruption that had been hidden for so long. As the truth came to light, the staff's perception of Alex shifted once again. They had already respected him more after learning about his past, but now they saw him as a problem solver, a leader in his own right. His quiet strength and intelligence had proven to be more valuable than anyone had realized. In an even more unexpected twist, the company, now in a state of disarray and desperately needing new leadership, offered Alex a high-level position once again. The staff rallied behind the offer, many of them praising the idea of having someone with Alex's integrity and skills at the helm. But Alex, despite the opportunity, shook his head. He had no desire to return to the high-powered world of corporate leadership. He had found peace in his humble role, and that was enough for him. He had no interest in climbing the corporate ladder again, especially not under such a cloud of scandal. "I'm happy where I am," Alex said firmly. "I've learned what matters most: my family, my dignity, and my peace. I don't need the power or the title. I just want to do my job and live with respect." Though Alex turned down the high-level position, his decision was met with respect from the staff. They now saw him not just as a janitor, but as a man who had the strength to remain true to himself, no matter the circumstances. From that day on, Alex was treated with the respect he deserved, and the office dynamics began to shift. No one would ever underestimate him again. As for Mr. Crawford, he was ousted from his position, his reputation destroyed by his own greed and arrogance. Alex, however, moved forward with his head held high, knowing that his worth had never been tied to a title or position. It had always been about the quiet integrity he carried within himself. In the end, Alex's journey served as a powerful reminder of the true meaning of humility and respect. Throughout the entire ordeal, he never sought validation from others. His strength came from within. He found fulfillment not in titles or power, but in his quiet ability to remain true to himself, no matter the circumstances. Alex had always known that his worth wasn't determined by his position, and as he continued his role as a janitor, his self-respect and integrity became his greatest assets. Meanwhile, Mr. Crawford's career spiraled downward, his fall from grace, a direct result of his own arrogance and greed. His once glorious position was taken away, leaving him with little but the consequences of his actions. The staff, who had once remained silent in the face of Crawford's mistreatment of Alex, now learned a valuable lesson about empathy and respect. They realized that the people who seemed insignificant on the surface often held the most value. It wasn't the power or title that made someone important. It was their character, their dignity, and the way they treated others. Alex, though never seeking recognition, became a silent hero in the eyes of his co-workers. Through his quiet strength and unwavering integrity, he taught them that true worth is defined by actions, not labels, and that respect is something that must be earned, not demanded. Thank you for watching this incredible story of humility, respect, and quiet strength. Alex's journey reminds us that true worth isn't determined by titles or positions, but by integrity and how we treat others. We hope this story has touched your heart and made you reflect on the power of empathy and respect in our daily lives. If you enjoyed this story, please consider subscribing to our channel for more emotional and inspiring tales like this. Don't forget to hit the like button, leave a comment to share your thoughts, and share this video with your friends and family to spread the message of kindness and self-respect. Your support means the world to us, and we can't wait to bring you more stories that inspire and move you. Thank you for being a part of our community.